Thank you all so much for coming. I'm Heather Hartnett. I'm General Partner and CEO of Human Ventures. Human Ventures is what we call a business creation platform based here in New York City. We're made up of a venture fund and a startup studio. We invest and we build at the earliest stages with exceptional founders. And we've recently launched our cohort of exceptional founders who are all building companies in the area of future of work. And we are thrilled along those lines to have here with us today one of my absolute favorite New York founders, Isaac Oates. He's the founder and CEO of Justworks. And Justworks, for those of you who don't know, which I'm sure you all do, or you wouldn't be here, is a simple software and expert support platform for payroll, benefits, HR, and compliance. And it's really a company that impacts so many of us in the startup world. We have one of our areas that we love in Future of Work is worker well-being. And we thought that this, what other company better exemplifies worker well-being than one that has the benefits of all of the employees at heart. So thank you so much, Isaac, for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I'll start by just saying that, we had a call ahead of time and I got to know Isaac a little bit and was just so impressed with his background. And before founding Justworks, Isaac served for 12 years in the National Guard and Army Reserve as an intelligence officer. And I think that that's where he really said that was where the importance of an unshakable team and the focus on people became clear to him. He began his professional career as a software engineer for Amazon, eventually leaving to build his first startup. And that was acquired in 2009 by Etsy. And so we're thrilled today to just hear from Isaac a little bit about his journey. And, he's in a field that's been impacted by COVID and is somebody who's a leader in the industry. So, I'll first just ask, Isaac, I'd love to hear a little bit from you of how you started Justworks and what the impetus was.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for having me here. I should caveat, like when we were first emailing about worker well-being, I am figuring it out too. So I'm sure we'll spend lots of time talking about that. So I'd been at Amazon for about 5 years and I left to co-found a company called Adtuitive. And, we raised $1.3 million, which was definitely like the most amount of money that any of us had ever seen in a bank account. And we all moved here to New York to kind of get things off the ground. And so, we raised this money and like basically first things first, I was like, well, how are we going to pay ourselves and how are we going to start hiring these people and like using this money? And so I called ADP. I was just like, well, that would be like a good way to do this. So I called them. I signed up for this product called Easy Pay, and it was not easy. I was on a fax machine a lot. This is like 2009, so it's a while ago, but it's not like that long ago. And my co-founders would just make fun of me, for like being on a fax machine. I'd have like another trip to the post office. They're like, what are you doing right now? And I was like, well, I'm just trying to pay our employees. And so, fast forward about 3 years, our company had been acquired by Etsy, ended up building out their payments platform. And, like my last year was kind of this interesting moment, like because Etsy had bought our company and it came through an acquisition, like I was on a contract and it was like a 3-year contract. And, not that I was like fired on the last day of the 3 years, but it was sort of set up where you like probably worked for the 3 years and left. So like on my first day there, I knew that like probably I'd just worked there for 3 years and that was going to be it. And so like my last year, I'm like, well, what am I going to start next? And they had this like amazing experience where I built out the payments team at Etsy. We built and launched a product called Direct Checkout. And it was this team of like 10 people, about 5 engineers and a product manager and designer and a couple operations people. And, I noticed 2 things. One is that we were really successful in accomplishing our goals. We were very clear about what our goals were. And this is in the backdrop of Etsy, which was a little bit of a crazy company at the time where the goals were less clear. And, we were just like relentless about getting our goals done, but also we had like an amazing time. Like I think we had like more fun than like anybody else there. And I was like, if I started a company and it was made up of teams like this, I bet like that company could probably do something pretty extraordinary. And so really like where I came at it was kind of like, how am I going to build this great team? And then what are we going to do? And I just kept coming back to like this ADP thing and like how you hire and pay people. And I called like my friends who were entrepreneurs and I was like, hey, what do you do for payroll? And they'd all get like really angry, like triggered now, you would say. Like,
Yeah.
and, I was like, all right, there's definitely like a pain point here. And I figured if we could like help these people hire people, like create jobs, basically, like that had to be a good thing. So anyway, that's how we got the business off the ground.
It's so amazing because I can't imagine starting a business now without having a platform like Justworks. And you always know that those are great companies when you say I can't imagine a world when it wasn't in existence. When you started building Justworks, how have you built your company with intentionality around your culture? Because employee well-being is such an important part of what you do and what you offer. So is that something that you've thought about internally, and how does that look for you?
Yeah. So, first I think, I've always like sought to create a place that people would want to be. And I guess like I can, I've only been one person, which is myself. So I spend a probably disproportionate amount of time kind of trying to put myself in people's shoes and be like, well, like what would I want if I was coming here? But, I do think that people, they kind of like want a place to belong. And I think especially, I thought a lot about younger people, maybe people who like moved to New York for their first job, moved to New York to prove that they could do it. And I was like, well, if we're a place where people can come and do that and like have an amazing time along the way, like that, I don't know, it just seemed like it would work. And so in terms of kind of the culture, I mean, the biggest thing is that, on the second month of the company, we had this offsite, it's like four of us. And, went to my apartment in Brooklyn and we came up with this like set of values. And we were, when you're four people, like it's actually pretty easy to agree on like a common set of things that, you value together. And we just agreed that we would look for those values in the people that we hired. And the way I kind of figure is like everybody has their values just from like their upbringing and childhood and experiences. Like you're not really going to change what somebody's values are, but you could at least like select for people that kind of have like an overlap. And so I think what we have accomplished over what now is 8 years is we've like, consistently hired people that have this like one overlap, right? And it's for us, it's like these 5 values: camaraderie, openness, grit, integrity, and simplicity. And I think that that's kind of like the common thread for everybody. And so I think, that's probably like the single most important thing that we did. I'll also point out, like I interviewed every single person that we hired until we got to about 120 employees. I probably interviewed like 1,500 people. And
How big are you now? How big is Justworks now?
We have almost 600 people.
It's amazing. So. And we were just talking about this. Are you back in your office? How is it working with the 600?
Yeah, so we're just starting to experiment with our office. I think the model, like the mental model here, is like a coffee shop. So, when we like, you don't have to go to the coffee shop. You just like could if you wanted to. And so, the message for our team is like, look, if you're in New York and you want to like be with some of your people and you feel safe and comfortable, then this is like a place you could come. And, we have obviously like a whole set of guidelines and things to like help people feel comfortable and, really, ideally like, minimize like risks, related to the health situation. And I think, we've had maybe like 12.5 people come back. It's just like the past couple of days. And people seem like really happy to see each other. They're also employees that we've hired like since the pandemic. So they have never, their whole experience has just been this is like their job. And so finally, they're able to start meeting some of their colleagues in person and kind of see like this physical manifestation of what they joined. I think it might be a long time though before, we're like really asking people to come back. Like that's very TBD.
Well, it's hard. I mean, if culture is such a big thing for you, it's really hard when you have an in-person culture and these little things that build up and build that camaraderie. What have you done to kind of translate that into the virtual world? And are there some of the things that, allowed you to be your team and your unique personality that you brought into the virtual world?
Yeah, this has been really hard. I think we we have always been really focused on being together, accomplishing things together, like a certain physicality. We've done a lot of events over the years. I mean, we'll like take, like when we were pretty big, it took like 4 buses worth of people to like medieval times in New Jersey, like all kinds of just like after work, just like fun stuff, where I think when people have shared experience, it just makes it easier to connect and create things together. So, I'd say we've like, if there was like a spectrum, like we're all the way on one end of the spectrum in terms of like depending on that physicality. And I think that means that the pandemic and the requirement essentially for everybody to work remotely has probably actually hit us harder than most companies because we are so dependent on this. I think in the beginning, people had, people have relationships obviously that they're bringing in from their time, in person. But what I would say has been really challenging is like building empathy, like and then, sort of like the casual communication that you get, of course, when you're in person, the drive-bys at your desk or whatever. We did something really successful last Friday, something really special, which is like we've been taking the company to Camp Towanda in Pennsylvania for like 5 years going. And we've had a retreat for longer than that. It's super fun. It's like everybody goes, it's 2 days long. So there's a sleepover. So we bonfire, we do like Olympics, like there's a lot of time for people to just kind of like roam around this like huge piece of land and hang out. And like people, I think pretty consistently say that it's like one of the most special things that they've done like in their working life. And needless to say, this September, that was not happening. And our team, we worked with an outside vendor, but we created something called Camp Telawanda. And it was like the closest we could get to doing this in person. And I will tell you, like we had, I think about 2/3 of our team participated. And it was like, let's say like 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock kind of thing. And you had to sign up. We'd like mailed you like a hat that was like the color of your team, for the Olympics, like all this kind of stuff. People, I think, had an unbelievable time. And like, there was no,
this is all over.
It was like a mix of tools. So we worked with this outside firm called Breakout, but it was like a mix of different kind of interaction tools, but there were like icebreakers and contests, and I don't know. It was amazing. And I think so many people had a fun time.
There'll be a case study, I'm sure, going forward. The bigger kind of view of benefits too, I wanted to ask you, you were talking about, I was talking to one of my investors who's of a different generation and he's older, and he said, worker well-being in my day, that was just getting your paycheck, and so it stuck with me. But, I think it's good that your company gives this culture and this benefits. But what are some of the things that you've seen that are really kind of need to haves for your employees versus all of these kind of, ancillary things that in the Google's days, that made it all popular to have ping pong tables and all this sort of stuff. And we realize that's actually not what people want, the employees necessarily. How do you think about that line of benefits and how much you should be providing for your employees versus just a stable job?
Yeah. Well, I think people want to know that you care. So, and like a way that you can express this, is like through money essentially, but through the set of benefits that you offer. And so we offer all of the benefits that are on our platform that our customers can opt into, we also make available to our employees. And, like an example would be like mental health benefits, right? So we have our employees have access to Talkspace. They have access to some employee assistance programs through Health Advocate. Now like whether they're, using them or able to like navigate those or whether they're exactly the right fit, I think it's really variable, especially with as many people as we have, and the fact that like a topic like that is so sensitive. But I think consistently employees know that we offer a lot that's available to them. In terms of what they use, I guess I don't have like a super detailed breakdown, but there are definitely some staples like medical, dental, and vision that I think are pretty important. I think, 401k is like still is important, but I think where people have student loans, a lot of times they like prefer to prioritize and perhaps should, prioritize like paying off their student loans as opposed to putting, in a 401k. And then I think all the other benefits, like, I don't think most people don't use all of them, but if you have like this buffet, I guess if you think about a buffet, it's like, well, you could only eat so much, right? But if you have like more choices, maybe you have a better shot at like the thing that you want, which I think is what makes it like so powerful to have a rich benefits platform where you don't have to like put a lot of work to offer like a lot of different things.
What are some of the benefits that you hear your employees or from just the industry at large asking for? We have a lot of founders on here right now who are building those types of things. Is it daycare? Is it assisted living for your parents? Like, what are some of the things that you are seeing that you don't think are out there yet or done?
Yeah. Oh, that's like an interesting question. I mean, in terms of what people are asking for, I'm not sure like what beyond the basics. Like, I think it just really depends. I know there are certain benefits people really like Class Pass, right? Is like something people get really excited about. City Bike is like a benefit that we've had. Like, we made it a benefit. Like, it just wasn't a benefit until we started offering it on our platform. It was just like a thing that you paid for. And I think people really like that. But I guess what I would say, if you were thinking about, building an employee benefit, is that, I don't know, like, needs to resonate with like the person's like personal situation. And so, if you think about something like City Bike, for the person who wants to use it, it's like the most amazing thing ever. They're like, wow, I use this every day and it's free, and then for everybody else, they like just don't care. So I think you just have to kind of know who you're solving for.
Yeah, well, definitely. And in general, our hypothesis is that, companies are caring about your different stages of life and thinking about your kids and also fertility and things of this nature. So I'm sure we'll start to see more of that as a staple as these businesses grow.
I think, yeah, we spent a lot of time talking about some of these benefits, and I know I've been in a lot of meetings about childcare, in particular, fertility benefits. I think the challenge with a lot of these is that they are very, very expensive. And so, if you're talking to like a big company that has a lot of money, like this can work for them. They may have a strategy that's like, we want to like retain, parents as they like have kids. And so therefore we're going to like offer this set of things, and they can do that. I mean, small businesses, which is who we work with entirely, like if you have some benefit that's like $1,000 a month or something, I mean, there's just like no way. So I think that's like one of the challenges with a lot of kinds of benefits, is when you just get to like the underlying costs, they can just be really prohibitive sometimes.
When you first started with Justworks, so much of what you do, like you said, you work with small businesses. What was your go-to-market, and what was your kind of marketing tactic for getting these new businesses online, especially with a company that just is starting, and this is such an important part of your business. So you have to have that trust early on.
Yeah, so we definitely didn't know what we were doing. I think that became very clear. But so, we built this platform. It was like let's just say it was like very, very basic at the beginning, as these things might be. And then we started having all our friends meet for dinner. This is sort of like before, remember, we were sort of in this like dinner as a service moment like a year ago. But back in like 2013, this actually wasn't happening that much. And so we would just invite like everybody we knew to these dinners with like maybe like 30 people in like the basement of a thrift shop in like the Lower East Side. And then, we'd have our team like sprinkled in there, and they would get to know each other. And I think because we just managed to invite like really nice people, everybody at dinner would be like, well, I don't know about all this like Justworks situation, but these people at this dinner are like really nice. Like, I would work with them. And then like over time, like you almost are just like imbued with this like trust, from like sort of who you get there. And so the truth is like, that's mainly how we went to market our first year, which is not scalable. And I wouldn't try to explain that to an investor. And then later on, I hired an inside sales leader who's still at our company and has built now it's like $100 million sales organization, which is incredible. And we basically started hiring inside salespeople from like these kind of like companies like Single Platform and Yext and Yelp, and training them like how to sell our products. And that's really, I think, how we did it.
What would you give advice to founders who are selling into benefits departments? It's such a niche kind of distribution channel, and it's evolved, but do you have any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess first, like selling to small businesses in that is like tough in this. So for us, like we have like a very high, like our unit economics are such that you could like sell to small businesses and the whole thing works. But I think if you're selling like a specific benefit, it's pretty hard to do this. Even something like health insurance, which is like the highest dollar volume kind of benefit, I mean, that still has to go through a channel. If you're going to like a big company, then I think, obviously you can go direct. And I guess what I would say is that, heads of human resources, chief people officers, they are, it's kind of like a new day for them. I think like historically, this has been viewed as like a fairly administrative role. And then relatively more recently, there's been this whole like, culture eats strategy for breakfast, where people are like, okay, well, culture is like really important in business. And so you get this, that's like elevated, I think, the role to some degree. But I think the past 6 months have showed everybody that like, in the end, your company is just people, and that like you play just a really key role in taking care of them. And so I think, heads of HR are faced with like a set of challenges that are frankly like pretty new for them and are new for everybody. And they want to take care of their people. They want to look good. They want to be relevant, and they don't necessarily know what relevant even means right now. And so I think as you're talking with them, like the more you could help them see that picture, which is kind of a vague statement. I think that's kind of how I imagine their mindset right now.
That's really interesting. We did touch on that too when we talked, around what the role of being a founder, a leader, a chief people officer right now looks like. It's so different, I think, than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago to be a leader of a company. How have you navigated some of the more tumultuous times recently? Of course, there's COVID, the public health crisis, economic crisis, social injustice. What advice do you have for founders right now who, should culture be a part of what they're thinking about right now? Do you think, we talked a little bit about Brian Armstrong's very, articulate piece, but very vocal piece about, that fine line. I just curious to know your thoughts.
Yeah, well, I guess in no particular order. I mean, first, like when I started the company, I guess for me, it's like, my goal has always been to help people realize their potential. So whether that's people that I get to work with or the people that we support in the market, like that's kind of what I'm like trying to do. It took me a few years to like really articulate that and kind of come to see it, but it was very important and helpful. But like the role that, like, I mean, expectations from business leaders are like a little bit like off the charts right now. And I think, there's like a pretty visible deficit in public leadership right now. It's like not that new, actually. It's been sort of like, happening for a while. And I think remarkably, I think a lot of employees actually trust business leaders more than they trust like leaders in a lot of different kinds of positions. And also business leaders are more accessible. So, like if you work at a small company, you definitely like can talk to your CEO. And so, for me, that experience has been extraordinarily intense and pretty draining in a lot of ways. But also, I feel like, I have a responsibility to all the people that that do what we do. And so, I mean, I've been learning, I think, I definitely have learned more in the past 6 months, so I'm not sure I could like verbalize all of what it is yet than like the whole other 7.5 years about what it means to be a leader and have people look up to you in an environment where like you really just don't know like which way is up. So that has been pretty challenging. I don't know what it's like to be a founder of a brand new company right now. Like I actually just don't know, if I were like starting something today, or if I were joining something that somebody were starting today, like what I would expect of that founder.
Yeah.
It might be different. So I actually just couldn't answer that question.
I'm just gonna tell everybody in the audience right now. So definitely want you to put your questions in the Q&A, and we'll get to those in a moment. So if anybody has questions for Isaac, please put them in now, and I'll continue to talk, but don't be shy. One thing, Isaac, I think when you're talking about this, you've been able to kind of be a front runner ahead of your competition. And I think that a lot of what, when I think of Justworks, I think of your values. It does come through the simplicity of it, beautiful design, making kind of the benefits person the hero, which I think is really, it shows. And so I think that's probably a huge competitive advantage that you had. What other things do you think, stood out for you to give you that competitive advantage? And when you started to become a household name, like what was that pivotal moment?
Yeah. So first, I think, if you think about it in general, there's no reason like a startup should ever be successful. Like if you're like, all right, it's the beginning of 2013 and there's us and ADP, Paychex and everybody, like they definitely have all the money and all the people and all the information. So it's like, it actually like doesn't make sense that like you could start a company and compete with them and like gain market share. And so then the question is like, well, how's that happening? And I think the answer like basically is relevance. Like when you start a company, you get to be more relevant than everybody else. And you get to build like the product of today, or maybe the product of tomorrow, instead of like the product of like 10 or 20 years ago. And that's like pretty much the only thing you have going for you at the beginning. And then obviously you like, sort of get people around that, and, kind of takes on a life of its own. And so I think, like my own personal experience here was that I'd used ADP. I didn't think it was very good, the product that they had. And I was just like, I would want a better product than this. And this is what I would want it to do. I would want it to just work. I mean, it's like, it's like that. And then I basically just like built the thing that I wanted, and kind of hoped that like lots of other people would want the same thing as me. And, it like turned out to be true that like lots of people did want this. And so, I think that's like, I would imagine like most entrepreneurs kind of have this experience, which is that, you get to build something that is like more relevant than anything else out there. Now getting the word out, that's like pretty challenging. So I think there's like a lot of climbing uphill there. But you do have like that advantage. And I think, like maximizing that is really important. How
do you keep on top of things, continue to grow, use your frameworks? What are some of the things that you do? I always say the company can only grow as fast as the human who's running it. And so, I'm sure you've found that you're one of the most humble founders when I talk to you about your success, but what is it that keeps you hungry and curious in that way?
Yeah, I mean, I have this I'm just like unbelievably fortunate to be in the position that I'm in. Like, it's just kind of like to be in a job that kind of like changes all the time, but like only as fast as you can change, is like it just like most jobs just aren't like that. And I think it's like it's pretty incredible. For me, like at some level, I guess how I think about it is like, I want to be like the best possible leader, and like parent and family member and like person. And everything I do is just like a chance to kind of like practice that. I was in like a leadership meeting the other day, and I've been working really hard to just like keep my mouth shut, which is like actually pretty easy on Zoom because it has a mute function, and I just leave it muted pretty much unless there's like something I really have to say. So in like a 90-minute meeting, I think I spoke for like 2. And, like there are all these things that I'm sitting there like thinking of. I'm like, okay, well, we should do this, right? But I was like on mute, so I just didn't say anything. Well, guess what? Like somebody else like said the same thing, and maybe even like a better version of it. And like, I didn't need to be in there, like offering my opinion about it. And I mean, I think like watching, for example, how your team grows so that you can just kind of like move on to like different and bigger things. That's been like one of probably like the really gratifying things, actually.
I like that. Alfonso Carney asked, how did you come up with your company values? Did you use some sort of framework, or was it just a brainstorm together?
Yeah, so we had Post-it notes, and I think we talked about people that we admired. I remember like Nelson Mandela being like one of these people, and that like somebody's mom was one of these people. But it was kind of like that, like imagining like a person that was like just a person you looked up to, and then we took all of them and just like mushed it together kind of until it kind of seemed right. I don't know. There's not a lot more than that. When you have 4 people, this is not that hard. Yeah. Which is why I think it's like a really worthwhile thing to do early and then hire against.
Have you revisited them, or that was been steadfast?
Well, the original version looks like a little bit more like a word cloud. So it's got like 15 words, which is like way too much for anybody to remember. But we hired a marketing consultant. This is like super interesting, actually. So we hired a marketing consultant in the end of 2014. It's like at the end of our second year. And she is on this phone call right now. And she helped us consolidate, she basically talked with everybody in the company and then like sort of like rewrote this like word cloud of values into 5 values. And then the one thing we have changed, and that like stuck, and it's like this acronym COGIS, and it's like really easy. I don't think we wrote it as an acronym originally. Acronyms are amazing. They're just like easy for everybody to remember. And then we changed the C. So the C was like in this exercise had been compassion, but in our original word cloud had been camaraderie. And then I found a letter a few years ago to like the board where I had actually said that it was camaraderie, but then it was compassion. And so it was always like a little bit not sure. And then a few years went by, and this is the one where I would watch people. These values are crazy like this. We had this value of camaraderie and this value of grit, and people would kind of like punch each other in the face with them. Like somebody would be like, you need to work harder. You need grit. And then somebody else would be like, well, you need to be like nicer to me. You need to be more compassionate. And like, it was like this I was just like, this is crazy. And so we put in camaraderie, which is about accomplishing something together, which I think gets in many ways like the very core of who we are. And that's like the one thing that we changed a couple of years ago. It was really hard to change. Like even now, some people are like, nah, you shouldn't have changed that. Like you just get, if you can get it right at the beginning, life is like a lot easier.
I love that. Actually, one of our newest investments, the founder, Janine Silvera, who introduced us to Isaac, introduced Human to Isaac, has a company, Herc Wellness, and she does these incredible workshops too, with what you're talking about. So another question from JJ Caffey. I love this. Do you have any advice on strongest metrics to measure around worker well-being? And so basically for those who are pitching to enterprise or, wanting to, just what you were saying, pitch to the HR leaders, what do other stakeholders actually care about?
Yeah. Oh, that is such a good question. I mean, I guess like the go-to is like employee retention and like the various cuts on that, which is like, it kind of gets you there, but people could be like pretty unhappy, but like not leave their job. And so it definitely masks some things. I guess like if you have, we ourselves have not gotten, it's very hard to do this, but in an ideal world, you're kind of asking like a set of survey questions, I think over like a period of time, over a really long period of time. And I think it matters maybe less what the questions are, but more that the questions are consistent. And then you could like measure how it changes. And so I think like those kinds of indicators are probably tell me the most about like where we're really at, like how do people perceive their teammates and their leadership and their compensation and all of those things. The problem, of course, is that like the questions you pick, if you're at a growth startup, this is really hard because the questions you pick at the beginning and the questions you need to ask like 5 years later are like typically not the same questions. And then you like lose your ability to compare. For a really big company, they might not have this problem. So it might be that they've been they're seeing like increases or decreases in those scores. And while I don't know what the scores would be, you could bet that if they're seeing something dip, whether it's like confidence in leadership or how people feel connected to their peers or whatever, they're like pretty interested in finding ways to like send those back the other way.
That's helpful. I think that's great. Melissa Tran said, my co-founder Emma and I are building a product that makes backup child care available to working parents as an employee benefit. I'm curious, in a space where you're up against really old and entrenched players, how do you earn that early trust amongst your customers?
Yeah. So like, okay, so there's a really great book called Crossing the Chasm that everyone thinks they have read, but almost no one has read. But I read it a few years ago and I was like, oh, this was a good book. I probably should have read this a bunch of years ago. So I'm telling you about it now. But in Crossing the Chasm, you know, they have this model that everybody knows where you have the innovators and the early adopters and the early majority and all this. And what the book like is really saying is when you first like go into the market to sell your product, people are not buying your product. They're buying you. They're buying, they're basically like voting for you with money. And, you know, they like what you represent and they want you to be successful. And so they'll do a deal with you, even though under most circumstances, they probably wouldn't. And these are like, they're like subtle differences, but these are like your innovators and your early adopters. They like, it's more like they want you to be successful than anything else. Then you have sort of like the whole rest of the market, which is like a little more rational and is just kind of like, you know, is this like the right thing at the right price point? Do I trust it, et cetera? So, you know, I guess what I would say first is that if you are a founder and you are doing B2B sales, the more that your prospect can understand like who you are, not just your company, but literally you, I think the better chance you have of somebody saying like, you know what, I'm going to take a chance and like, I'm going to like go to bat for this person because I think like this could be great and I want them to be successful. And then like, you know, you need to do like everything possible to make those people really, really glad that they took a chance on you. In the end, you know, those become referrals and it becomes like reputation and credibility and all those things. But in the beginning, they're buying you. It's not your product. And so, you know, don't be too quick to hire like the head of sales.
That's a great suggestion. They're buying you. I think that's right. Amber Lyon has a great question too. She said, this year has shown that the traditional solutions for mental health and mental well-being are just not cutting it anymore. How can business leaders and managers lead the charge in destigmatizing mental health for their employees and better support them through difficult times?
Yeah. So this has been like such like an interesting and challenging thing. I think like in our company, you know, we talk about mental health like relatively openly. I have a therapist. I talked to him on Monday. It was good 45 minutes, you know, and, you know, the company knows that. And I think it's like really important that they know that. But like, I think that, you know, it's such like even in like the best of times, like imagine you're in New York City and you're like, okay, I want to get a therapist. That's like a pretty complicated thing. Like you kind of have to get a referral from somebody, but then you don't really want to ask about it. We've done some things like we made a list. So we had people anonymously, like we kind of crowdsourced like a list of people's mental health providers that they liked. And we were just like, put in their name if you like them. And then we just made it available to our team. So you would even just kind of know like who to call. And then we make some of these things available, but it is worth remembering, I think, as a leader that you can control some things, but you cannot control your environment. And, you know, you can kind of mitigate those stigmas. Like you can make it seem okay, kind of, but you're still in like an environment where maybe it doesn't seem okay. And so you can like move the needle a little bit, but it is like an uphill thing just because, you know, like general views out there might be different than what you believe.
Yeah, I think that's
hi, Amber, by the way.
Ayush Gupta, he asks, can you speak a bit more to how the current state of wellness breaks down by industry? So an employer, what does wellness look like in the media space? How does it compare to wellness in healthcare space? Any industries that are still really early on their transition to the modern state of wellness? That's an interesting question.
It's like a great question, but I'm totally ill-equipped to answer that at all. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a good question though.
Another one, I think, I think everyone's defining what wellness means right now. We're definitely changing a lot. What are some of the large scale macro changes you're seeing in the benefit space in terms of where leaders are spending their money? So pet insurance, family care benefits, we kind of touched on this a little bit, but what are you excited about in this area?
Yeah, well, it's another great question that I probably don't have
but you have an opinion because you think about it every day.
Yeah, well, so like, so when I think about the benefits that I want to offer to the team, what I want to give them are things that help them feel valued and feel to the best degree possible that we understand them. So that we like understand like what their life actually looks like and are like trying to help out in that. And so, I mean, because if you think about any of these benefits, I mean, for the most part, they're all things that you sort of like could get on your own. They probably would cost more. Maybe they wouldn't be as good or whatever. But, when you make it available, like you're just kind of saying like, I see you. So, I mean, I think for us, like our workforce is growing up a little bit as our company, grows up. And so, we definitely have, for example, more people that are, having kids and dealing with all the challenges that come with that. And I think, if to the degree, I mean, we offer like leave policies and things like that, but we don't have like a childcare offering, for example. And now it's sort of like I don't know, it's like a complicated time for childcare probably. But I think to the degree that we offered something, you would have this sort of segment of parents who are like, oh, wow, like Justworks like really understands like my unique challenge. And so I think that's like I think like the benefit of benefits to the employer is that.
We might have some good stuff for you coming up soon.
Oh boy.
What is next for you with Justworks? You're probably always thinking a couple years out. It's an incredible platform. I saw that you also just acquired a company called Boomer. What's new? What's next for you and on the product horizon?
Yeah. So I mean, acquiring Boomer was like a really exciting. I'll just say that as somebody who sold a company 10 years ago, to like be on the other side of that transaction and like work with a founder to buy their company was like a very gratifying experience. And we like worked really hard to make sure that they felt like, we were like treating them right and that they were like happy with their new home.
I always love seeing that, when founders acquire other startups. But tell everybody what Boomer was and why you acquired them.
Yeah, so Boomer is a time and attendance platform, and that basically means you can clock in, clock out on your phone. They can track like where you work and when you're working, and then that kind of feeds into your payroll data. For our business, I mean, integration is kind of the name of the game, and so when the systems aren't integrated, it means that a person at your company is sitting there like keying all this stuff out of one, like they're copying and pasting from one system to another, which is both annoying and error prone. So buying Boomer is going to give us an opportunity to integrate and provide a really seamless experience to our shared customers. And ultimately what it does for our business, like the reason, the business rationale is that it expands our target market. So like for us, when we kind of look at the product investments that we want to make over the next few years, they really are related to increasing the diversity of businesses that we can serve. We skew like pretty heavily white collar right now. Like we have lots of startups, for example, and other types of white collar businesses. And frankly, like we got pretty lucky in the pandemic because they were affected probably the least of any kind of business out there. But, in the end, it's like if we seek to accomplish our goals, help more people realize their potential. Well, we're not just trying to help like white collar employees realize their potential. And so adding features and functionality that make our product more relevant to businesses and that have like more sophisticated needs and more complex needs, like those are the things that are on our roadmap. But we're sort of in a constant process of working out exactly what the next things are. The time and attendance is a big one there.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, in this kind of is tangential to that too, but with the increase in on-demand sharing, gig economies, more knowledge workers and labor workers alike, adopting the independent contractor lifestyle, how do you see benefits changing and becoming more accessible to all, or do they remain tied to the workplace? Is there ever going to be kind of that unbundling?
Yeah, it's like very interesting. I mean, we talk about this a lot, obviously, in like the context of, an election and kind of like what happens after that. I mean, right now, benefits are sort of like really tied to employment actually, no, I'm not intimately familiar with the history of this, but it seems to have something to do with like World War II and like the time right after that. So a lot of years have gone by. And I think maybe that model is like not as relevant. So I kind of imagine in the coming years, like one way or another, it's going to be easier for independent contractors and other people who don't have like a traditional kind of employment relationship to get access to good quality benefits. But it's like really hard to say how exactly it's going to happen. But my feeling is it's going to happen. And the reason for that is that there are more and more people in that ecosystem, and those people vote and they have opinions about it. And I think, more and more people that are in elected positions, for example, like they understand this in a way that, maybe somebody 20 years ago didn't. And so I do kind of imagine that there will be more ways for people to get access to really good health benefits that don't involve them having to get it through an employer. And I think that would be a good thing.
Yeah. And so 3 questions actually came in that were along the same lines. And as a leader, people were asking, you said that a lot of people stay in their jobs if they're unhappy for a long time. And so people are wondering, how do you approach these situations? Is there a better way? And then said another way, you've hired a lot of people. And so, worker productivity is really important. So what's your advice if an employee is underperforming and not the right fit you thought they would be, to either help them turn it around within the company or to cycle them off of your company?
Yeah. It's like, I mean, turnover is like not in and of itself like a bad thing. Like kinds of turnover can be bad, and too much turnover or not enough turnover can be bad. But I mean, I think like organizations benefit from new people coming in and people going out, and that especially, it's especially relevant actually in like a growth company, because the truth is like the environment changes quite a lot. So the person who's going to like love working at a 20-person company, like they might also love working at a 200 or 2,000 person company, but like they might not. And so if your company grows and is successful, like you're going to kind of like be faced with the situation over and over again where, maybe the person likes the job, now they don't like it as much. They were a high performer, now they're not as high of a performer. And I guess like the best thing I could say is like, instead of like beating around the bush with people, be as direct as you can be. Like, and this is, I think this is really hard for a lot. I mean, it's just not even like to CEOs. I mean, people in general, like a lot of people are like not like rushing into like a conflict-filled situation. But I mean, every time that I have like addressed some topic head on, I've always known afterwards that was like the right thing to do. And, I've spent my share of time like avoiding it, having an employee who like, I know, and they know it's like not going well, or they're not happy or whatever. And you just are sort of like dancing around it. And then eventually, you talk about it and it's like consistently better after that. And so I think, as you grow your company, like it's like one of the hardest things you have to do is like bring people in and let people go and kind of help your organization just like kind of cycle in like a really natural way. And there are going to be some people on your team today that like are on your team in 10 years, and there are like a lot who aren't. But I think the more like direct you can be, I think that frankly, the easier it is for everybody.
One of our values at Human, we talk a lot about reciprocity, about founders who are, able to either pay it forward or help other founders. We so appreciate you doing this, and in the vein of helping founders too. How do you think about kind of giving back to the founder ecosystem? Who were some of the people who you early in your career gave you that leg up, or do you invest in companies, and how do you think about the founder ecosystem? And you touched a little bit about it, like buying Boomer was a big one,
Yeah, that was a pretty cool one. Yeah, so one of the really awesome things about my job is that I get to talk to founders, and then it's like part of my job because we serve small businesses. So, I could just like chalk it up to market research and then also, be like helping somebody at the same time. So, which sounds like a funny thing, but when you're spending all your time trying to justify your time, like it actually is like kind of nice to be able to do it that way. So that's pretty great. But I'd say there's a few things. I mean, one is, I talk with a lot of founders, and, I try to share, I guess, like in this conversation, but experiences that I've had. I especially try to share things that maybe like normally people aren't talking about. So like, dealing with investors is like a classic thing that like founders are often kind of like reluctant to talk about, especially in a forum where there are investors. But like they still need to know how to do it. And so that is a like number one like question area. Occasionally I invest, not that often, but what is really great about, making an angel investment is that you can like help a founder get momentum like in their deal. So it's like so many times like you have somebody and it's like all these people are sort of like halfway in. They're like, yeah, I'd be like interested in that. Yeah, I'd like consider. Yeah, let me know how it's like coming together, and maybe I'll like jump in. And every so often, I meet somebody, and usually it's the way that this kind of happens for me is that I meet them and I'm like, I would totally hire this person in a different circumstance to like come work with me and do like X. And but like in the most like obvious way. And then I'm like, well, like I can't because they're, like doing their thing. But, maybe I have a chance to back them. And my hope is just that it like actually helps them raise like way more money from like a bunch of other people. And that's like really, I don't know. I mean, it's just nice to see people succeed, and it's nice to play even like a small role in that.
It is. I mean, founders investing in other founders, even if it's a small amount, means so much. I think it's way more than a signaling, for any other investor. It's huge. Founders beget great founders. So I think that's really well said. So our last question that came in was, what is your advice with dealing with investors? And since that's a huge topic, and maybe we have you back and do that whole, that whole segment just on that. But I'll ask you, what's one thing that, think back of kind of your seed stage, when you're first getting off even before pre-seed, even before seed, what's your greatest piece of advice around dealing with investors or fundraising?
I think like, especially when you're an early stage founder, I mean, like the power differential between you and the investor is overwhelming. Like they have the money, you do not. You depend on them to survive. So, I mean, it's like a pretty crazy dynamic. But then at the end of the day, I mean, investors are people also. They have a job. Their job is to invest the money and get a good return on average. And so I think like, and I think it's important as in every relationship to be respectful and considerate and like all those things that you hopefully do with everybody. But I think like just trying to take some time to understand like where the investor, like how they're doing their job, and how that relates to what you're doing is like I don't think most founders do this, or maybe are even able to do it at the beginning. But like the more you can understand, and I think some investors are like pretty forthcoming actually. Like if you kind of ask like, hey, like what's your like investment methodology? They'll be like, well, like it's this and it's this and it's this. And I look for this. And then, you know, if like you don't fit that, then like you don't fit that. So that's just like good to know. And then, you know, if like you do, then that could be amazing. But I think like just kind of trying to see past like the power differential and it's to like this person is like possibly like a future colleague, like a person you're just going to work with for a long time. Like that is like who it is. So I don't know if that's helpful, but
I love that. It's very helpful. Well, Isaac, it was so funny when I was promoting this talk, I kept on having to put this isn't an ad for Justworks because I do love the product so much. We definitely encourage all of our founders to use it. It's been so lovely talking with you. And every time I get to hear you, whether you're giving a talk or, you know, just talk to you one-on-one, I learned something. You're very humble and just wish you and your company all the best and best success. Please let us know at Human, however we can be helpful. And thank you so much for all of your insights. And thank you to everybody in the audience who asked wonderful questions, very thoughtful questions. So maybe we'll do a part 2.
It was great. Well, Heather, thanks so much for having me. This is a really fun conversation. And yeah, I hope it helps somebody. But yeah, be well.
Thanks so much. You too. We'll talk soon.